Now, French President Emmanuel Macron has accused the United States of turning away from allies and breaking international rules as European powers scramble to respond to U.S. threats over Greenland. In his annual speech, Macron described the world as one with great powers who he alleged had a real temptation to divide up the world, while he criticized both China's increasingly uninhibited commercial aggressiveness and Russia as a destabilizing power for Ukraine war. His remarks about the U.S. stood out the most. Listen to this.
The United States is an established power, but one that is gradually turning away from some of its allies and freeing itself from international rules it promoted not long ago, whether in trade, certain security matters, or some forums.
The White House said this week that Trump wanted to buy Greenland and refused to rule out military action to get the territory. In the latest, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has warned Europe to take Trump seriously on Greenland.
Number one, Greenland is really important, not just to America's missile defense, but to the world's missile defense. Number two, we know that there are hostile adversaries that have shown a lot of interest in that particular territory, that particular slice of the world. So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it. What that is, I'll leave that to the president.
Trump has long talked about acquiring Greenland, but has ramped up his threats since the U.S. military operation toppled Maduro last week. While Maduro's second-in-command, Delcy Rodriguez, has taken over as interim president, Trump claims to be running Venezuela. The U.S. president has made more important announcements with regards to the Latin American country, including that it will give 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to U.S. He's pressing American oil companies to invest in the South American country's energy sector. He's scheduled to meet with the heads of major oil companies at the White House today to discuss ways of raising Venezuela's oil production. Then there, however, seems to be growing skepticism. Now, Financial Times claims that the executives meeting Trump are expected to press the president on providing strong legal and financial guarantees before they agree to commit capital to Venezuela. And well, to discuss this further, we're now being joined live on the broadcast by Mike Buckley, senior journalist and political commentator, and Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, foreign affairs and security strategist at the University of Malaya. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us on the broadcast. Let me just come to Mr. Keat now. When we talk about Trump, his approach, do you think that President Trump's uncertainty in giving out statements somehow undermine America's credibility with allies who now depend on clear commitments? Here's an example. Now, we know that German president just reacted, and his comments came just yesterday on, he says, and I'm quoting him here, then there is a breakdown of values by our most important partner, the USA, which helped build this world order. How do you analyze this uncertainty that Trump shows in diplomacy right now?
Well, in geopolitics, predictability is vulnerability. We have seen how Trump has deliberately broken this archaic model of, signaling every move in advance, and this allows, rivals to plan ahead around America. And by being unpredictable, Trump forces adversaries to assume a worst-case scenario, and that deters aggression. So that's why we have seen how North Korea has paused long-range missile tests. That's why Iran pulled back after the Soleimani assassination, and why China has also recalculated its own trade and military timelines. And this also shows that this traditional diplomacy has always depended on credible threats, but Trump made threats, being credible again. So when he says something, no one knows whether he will actually do it, and this is precisely what restrains enemies. And if you compare that to Biden, if you compare that to Obama, whose red lines have been publicly stated, and then of course they have been ignored by Russia, they have been ignored by Iran, they have been ignored by Hamas and China. So this new style makes opponents negotiate out of fear, not from comfort. And that's why we have seen examples including NATO, including Mexico, and now in Venezuela. And this shows, the efficacy of, peace through strength. And of course, also by making America not only secure again and great again, is also making the world great again by deterring aggressions, by ensuring that there's this credible threats and that he's actually, projecting force and strength and hard power capacity. Whereas weak leaders, they create wars. And of course, unpredictable, strong leaders like Trump, they prevent them. So under Trump, we have seen no new major wars, but under predictable, rules-based presidents, we have seen how under the Biden administration, we have seen the cases of Ukraine, we have seen how the cases of Gaza, in Red Sea, in Taiwan. But this unpredictability of Trump, this convinces the enemies that escalation is too risky, it's too costly, and this is how and why precisely that Trump is being seen as a peacemaker.
You mentioned Israel-Gaza war, you mentioned Ukraine-Russia, but somehow, isn't it true that now when we look at Gaza, the second phase of 20-point peace plan, we don't know where it's going? And when we talk about Russia-Ukraine, when he clearly said that on the first day he's going to become president, he's going to declare peace, it hasn't happened. And we look at Thailand and Cambodia, which seem to be, there has to be a second ceasefire, but still there are some kind of uncertainty going on. Even in Israel and Gaza, you have some kind of, we have attacks. People are still dying in Gaza. When you talk about unpredictability and, giving him a strong point, somehow solving wars, it hasn't really, we haven't seen a solved war yet.
Well, we have to remember who started all this in the first place. It was under Obama that the disaster in Afghanistan happened, the disastrous withdrawal. Okay. And, it happened also under his watch in the case of Ukraine, in the case of Taiwan. And this has all, and Trump is being left to deal with all the mess. And even before he assumed power in his first term, he has also managed to settle, the discord, the conflict with North Korea. It was a mess under Obama during that time. It was a dangerous period of time. And this is how we have seen, the ability for Trump to have these unconventional approaches. And we have seen how it is, of course, a difficult, process for any peace deals, not only in Ukraine, not only in Thailand and Cambodia, but he is taking these, newfound measures to actually, force leaders to come to this agreement, to come to the negotiating table. But it won't happen under a possible second Biden administration. And we have seen how with conventional approaches, especially under the, woke policies by Obama or Biden, who have publicly stated red lines in Syria, in Ukraine, or in other parts of the world, but we have seen that being violated by other powers.
All right, I hear your point. I'll come back to you. I'll like to go to Mr. Buckley now. According to Mr. Keat, of course, his unpredictability is somehow a strength. How do you analyze it? When we consider, for example, NATO, has this approach somehow forced the allies to take somehow a greater responsibility of their own, considering the fact, NATO is one example? And how do you analyze this unpredictability from Trump?
Well, Trump's unpredictability. I mean, there could be two reasons for this. He could appear unpredictable because he's got a strategy and a plan to make the world a safer place, but he's appearing unpredictable to unsettle his allies. Or he could be unpredictable because he simply doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just doing things very reactively, day after day, doing what he feels like is the next, MAGA or the next impressive thing to do. And unfortunately, it appears that it's the latter. There is no strategy underlying his work. What he's doing is unpredictable. It may appear that that's making the world a safer place because it's unsettling his allies. Instead, what it is, unfortunately, is dismantling anything akin to a rules-based order that was for decades making the world a safer place, or at least large parts of the world a safer place. And as you just alluded to yourself, when he does engage militarily overseas, it doesn't lead to peace and stability. Gaza is more peaceful and safe now than it was before, but as you said, there's still been hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths since the so-called ceasefire was put in place. Even in southern Lebanon, which was supposed to have a ceasefire 6 or 8 months ago, there's still significant violent action there. And we see this in many, many parts of the world. Trump pays attention briefly, then he moves on and does something else. There's no way that what happened last week in Venezuela makes Venezuela safer, or the Western Hemisphere safer, or the rest of the world safer. You were right to say that the rest of NATO is stepping up with its defence spending, unfortunately too slowly, and the UK and Europe need to go further much more quickly. But the US half in, half out of NATO attitude that we have from Trump does not make Europe safer, doesn't make America safer, has not led to an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine. So Trump's foreign policy is making the whole world a more dangerous place, and that should genuinely be a concern to us all.
All right, Mr. Kidd, I'll come back to you now. I'll take the point from Mr. Buckley here. Do you think allies are now hesitating to align with the U.S. concerning the fact that they fear sudden policy shifts or withdrawal? We've seen these comments come from a French president as well as the German president.
Fear, but they also respect Trump, because we've seen how both NATO and Europe and Japan now they have increased their defense spending, not because they love Trump, but because they knew that he will act. And this profound fear of abandonment has forced this newfound responsibility and commitment to increase defense spending. We have seen that in the case of NATO. And without Washington, NATO is a spent force. And this is more credible and healthier than dependency. And Trump uses unpredictability to expose and of course to force adversaries into a tight space. And we have seen how Trump also makes American threats believable again. So under previous presidents, especially under Biden and Obama, threats became symbolic, but Trump showed that he will cross lines through the actions in Syria, in the case of Soleimani in the first term, in the case of the action in Venezuela or China tariffs. So, once adversaries believe that you might actually act, they will start to have, of course, self-restraint and self-deterring actions. And of course, also we have seen how Trump has single-handedly revived the future of NATO. And it's only through Trump that NATO has now begun the process of revival in terms of defense spending. And this is a good thing for Europe and, of course, for the safety of the world.
And considering the fact this, also I would like to ask you, and particularly making this U.S. foreign policy, it's rather reactive, when it comes to, it's not really, it doesn't seem very strategic. And the fact that, if you flatter him with, he should receive a Nobel Peace Prize, he'll go for a ceasefire, which again seems like it's unpredictable, considering the fact, as an example, of Thailand and Cambodia. So do you think it's these reactions coming from these countries like Thailand and Cambodia saying that he should get the Nobel Peace Prize is somehow, a reaction, not a strategic response from Trump?
Well, Trump practices this notion of strategic ambiguity, and if you can look through history, the most powerful militaries in history have also used this notion of uncertainty to deter war. So of course, the US did this during the Cold War, and Trump extended this logic to all of the current US foreign policies now. So when adversaries cannot really map or really find out clear America's red lines, they are forced to act cautiously. So of course we have seen how Biden has told the world what he would do or what he would not do, but Trump has kept all this close to his, all the cards close to him. So we have seen how Trump has broken the adversaries, planning cycles. We have seen how China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they have all planned years ahead, but a predictable American foreign policy allows them to calibrate risk more effectively. So Trump destroys that advantage. And of course, it's long overdue now for Trump to be given recognitions for what he has done in terms of deterring conflicts, in terms of preserving peace through projection of strength. And it's a shame that he has not been given such recognition and for what he has done now, and of course deterring conflicts and maintaining peace, for deterring more than 7 or 8 conflicts now since last year alone. And of course we have seen how his projection of strength has secured America and of course also has secured the world throughout.
All right, I'll take your point. Mr. Buckley, considering that move, do you think the adversaries like Russia and China, they're more cautious considering the fact that they don't know America's next move? Has that somehow become a strength for America?
No, not at all. I mean, we've seen Russia become even more belligerent on the battlefield in Ukraine. I mean, only yesterday, I think they used a missile that was not nuclear armed, but it was capable of being nuclear armed. It's only the second time that they've done that since the war started, and the first time was also while Donald Trump was president of the United States. And of course, Trump going into Venezuela, abducting their president, and effectively taking over the country. What that says to Russia, to China, to other belligerent states is this is a legitimate thing to do. When you want to do something, you have the strength to do it. You can do whatever you like to a neighbouring nation. To establish that precedent on a global scale from the world's still biggest superpower is a terrible thing to do. And of course, that's a big green light to China to say, go and take Taiwan if you want to. And it's a green light to Russia to say, carry on doing whatever you want to do in Ukraine. So this is terrible for global diplomacy and for politics. Terrible for NATO, of course, which is doing all that it can to deter Russian aggression in Ukraine. And it's absolutely right that Europe needs to step up and do more. But of course, given where things are, we still need the US on side. But I'm very glad that Macron in France, President Macron, has pushed back, and that Merz has pushed back, the German leader as well, to say to Donald Trump, you need to do more to support your allies. Because otherwise the world is going to continue deteriorating and becoming a less safe place for us all.
All right. Well, of course, if it's doing any favor to America, or maybe it's pushing the allies away, we'll have to wait and see how it all goes up. But thank you so much for both of you for joining us broadcast. That was Mike Buckley, senior journalist and political commentator, and Chong Yu Keat, foreign affairs strategist. Thank you so much for coming on the broadcast and giving your perspective.